so I kind of looked at the sheet of music. I was playing it. I turned it. I was playing it. And he said, yeah, that sounds really good, except you were looking at the wrong piece of music. So, so a lot of people that I know are musicians is they went to music because there was no plan B. You can get to your dream job or your dream house or dream everything. And I've seen a lot of people who are deeply unhappy and they've achieved exactly what they wanted. It's the difference between doing something out of fear and doing something with intention.
Hi, Nagi. Thank you for coming to this podcast. We're all friends, but I'm very curious about in the past 40 plus years, what would be the life inflection points that kind of changed your life trajectory?
Very good to see you, Jane. That is a very good question. So I think, so maybe just for background, born and raised in France, educated partially in the UK and the US. I'm coming from a background that is non-super traditional. My father is a concert pianist, born in Egypt. My mother had a training as a lawyer, but is a homemaker. And so I guess, one of those first elements that was very foundational for me is living in an environment that was very multicultural, where, the parents was not necessarily a dentist or things like that, but kind of outside the typical norm. And that was really foundational in shaping my perception of work. You're not talking about someone who goes to work at 7 and come back at 5. It's work all the time. I've seen my dad practice the piano ever since I can remember, every day, no holiday, no nothing. So just working a lot. And so that has shaped a strong, I think, a perspective on work ethic, on also being driven. And so that was very important for me. And on my mom's side, the law studies combined with very creative personality, bohemian, loving literature, things like that, the arts. It was an environment where we saw a lot of painters, a lot of musicians. And in an interesting way, I think it is very applicable to the workplace. I think, when you think about your father or your mother having a particular job in like a corporate environment, you're thinking, well, copy and paste the learnings. Well, in the music environment, it's extremely competitive. There is a perspective on shaping your identity through work versus not shaping your identity. There is a perspective of building your brand. There is a perspective of kind of, having every concert be a new environment where people will come, people will have different opinion perspectives. And so all of those, I think, are very applicable to a workplace. I think at least I've made them very applicable to my perception of work, whether at Meta or my prior experiences. So I think that's kind of the first one that was super, super foundational for me and continues to be honest.
You grew up in the family that was multicultural.
Yeah.
Mom is grounded, even though your mom is a lawyer, but also a homemaker, while your father is a dedicated musician. How is that going to impact you? Like, what you see every day when you're growing up, would that inspire you to do something similar, become a musician? Or, you want to do something completely different?
Yeah, I think it creates a few different things. The first one is, first of all, you see a particular aspect of the job, I might say, which is, your father being on stage, very well dressed. So there is a persona which is just really cool, really impressive. You also see the amount of work that is being put in kind of making this happen. I think from my perspective, so I started to take piano lessons. Arguably, my teachers would tell you that I was just a horrible student because the teacher that I had for a short amount of time was a teacher that taught a professional pianist. And so here I was, young kid who likes music,
How old were you starting?
I started kind of late. I think I must have been around 10, something like that. So not
Okay.
early by any means. I was playing by ear a lot. And I guess my dad wanted to find me the best teacher possible, the best instructor. But it's true that I was not necessarily drawn. So maybe in response to your question, it was more of a building myself a contrast And so I started picking up the guitar. I started picking up something that had nothing to do with classical music, playing by ear. Actually, that was my tie to going to the US originally.
Mm.
So my interest for the US as a culture really started with music. I started learning English because I wanted to understand the magazines about guitar, about music. And so one of my first memory was learning the word threshold, not in the common sense, but thresholds when it comes to like audio equipment. And so that's how I kind of learn English. Was really then became really attracted with the whole, West Coast recording studios environment. That's kind of how things started for me, but not related to learning classical music, going to the conservatory. That formal education, I kind of earned it myself quite later in life, literally about, I think, 5 years ago or so. I've been mostly kind of self-taught. But I think going back, the exposure to um, to the world of classical music was very impactful. It's very hard work. Anyone who's gone to a conservatory or who is classically trained is at a level of technical mastery and just artistic mastery that is just not the norm for any other types of music. Not to bash on anything else, but I think just the norm in classical music is to be extremely proficient and
Hmm.
a level of technicity. So that also shaped beyond purely music a perspective on um, what good is, what great is, the level of work that you have to put. It's not something where you just wing it and you take a picture and you post it and great. It's like a lot of actual hard work. And it's also
Hmm.
in the most recent years, I would say, it's also really been interesting to see the perspective of obviously a professional like my dad, in the context of, social media, in the context of, um, just building a brand and all of that. And, like the balance that one finds between shaping your brand and kind of doing the work, doing the work that you built over, 40, 50, 60 plus years of actual work every day.
Yeah, going back to that 10-year-old you
Yeah.
started the piano class. How did that started? Was that your idea or your father's idea? Was that planned?
So I looking back, I wish I had been more dedicated because the piano is such a great instrument. Um, at the time, it was definitely my parents, and their perspective was start with the instrument that is just almost the master of all instrument. And I subscribe to that idea. While I love other instruments as well, I think the piano is visually for anyone who's starting music. You can see the octaves. Everything is, one note per like as you press one
Per
key
key.
per
Yeah.
key. It's not like
It's
the guitar where
straightforward.
it's straightforward visually. And as a
Yeah.
result, I think it's a good perspective to understand and conceptualize theory. It's also, the balance between the right hand, left hand. Like a lot of it is great foundational thing. But at the beginning,
Hmm.
at the time, I don't think I was seeing it quite like that. And so it was my parents really saying, well, if you're going to start music, really, you should start with piano. And so that's when I started a little bit. And what I discovered was that I focused um, on my ear. So I trained my ear quite well to be able to pick up
You
tunes.
trained your ear or you were born with really good ear? The reason I ask is because I think I was born with really good ear as
Okay.
I could play keyboard when I was 3, any melody I heard. And now grow up, I realized about maybe 10% of population cannot do that. It's not that unusual, but I still
Wait.
believe I am born with untrained pretty good
Yeah.
ear.
Do you have perfect pitch?
I guess that's the thing. I
All
don't
right.
even know because I'm not professional trained, but I kind of know without any training or learning. When I hear a melody, number one, I can easily memorize.
Yeah.
Number two, I kind of can predict where it may go,
Yeah.
even for the first time hear it.
Yeah.
And number three, I can play it out on major C.
That's for sure. Well, you might have a perfect pitch. I don't. I think I have good ears, and I think I have relative pitch. So the ability to not say this is an E or this is an F, but
Yeah, I
it's
can
to.
do
Oh,
that.
okay. So I think
Right.
it sounds like we
Might be the
both have
relative pitch.
relative pitch. Yeah.
Yeah. Not perfect pitch.
I wish I had perfect pitch, though I've heard interesting things about the fact that it actually could be quite draining to every time you hear a sound like two cars colliding and you will say like exactly what note it is. So I'm
Right. Some
kind of
people can
happy
do that.
I don't have that. But in terms of ears, I think it's perhaps some element of my parents having both really good ears, but also
Mm-hmm.
something that I've trained over the years. And I think to go back to the 10-year-old, I was very lazy to read the notes on a piece of
Right.
paper.
Same.
And
I
so I
can't.
would actually listen to my teacher play, and I would actually just memorize and pretending I was reading it, to the point where once my dad, I think, was picking me up, or my mom was picking me up from the lesson, they sat
Yeah.
down and the teacher wanted to kind of show them what progress I had made. So I kind of looked at the sheet of music. I was playing it. I turned it. I was playing it. And he said, "Yeah, that sounds really good, except you were looking at the wrong piece of music." So, so
I
yeah,
totally get it
yeah,
because I have exactly same habit with like if I play some music, it's so draining for me to
yeah,
read the note.
yeah, it's tough.
So what I do is I look for the music, just listen to it, memorize it, so I may be able to play it, but my play would never be perfect because
Yeah,
not attached
yeah.
to the note on the sheet.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And I think over like more recently, the reason why I came back to music and tried to get a little bit of an education myself with theory and things like that is because I was curious to know what it feels to actually have that ability to read, have that ability to relate to, you know, certain theory and scales and things like that, because from an improvisation
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, it kind of opens the door. But these being said, I'm quite happy, and it sounds like it's the same for you, to be able to feel music, because I feel that like as you educate your ear, there's also benefits that you get that people that are just, proficient readers don't have per se. So I guess that's going to be a recurrent theme in our conversation, is the ability to um, be in situations, to react to situations, and to be able to identify how this can be something that helps you get to your goals, even though that may not be the standard way to do things, even though that may not be the standard things. Like that is, I think, speaks to almost like a philosophical approach to how you perceive, challenges, opportunities, how you perceive things that you feel you have as skills, things that may be more challenging for you to build, and how you
Mm-hmm.
can make that into something that will help you in the future and will help you kind of shape your path.
I really like that because I think there's two types of talents. One is luckily born with certain unusual talent. That's like
Yeah,
a gift. But maybe what I'm missing is like the gift of effort, like learning something really complex, reading the music sheet, be 100% precision, precise. You need constant practice
yeah,
and you need tons of effort. But I believe being able to put consistent effort into something is also a type of talent,
absolutely, absolutely. And the
right?
more you do it, the more you learn how your brain functions, how your motricity, memory works, how, some people are very visual learners, some people it's like muscle memory, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
combination of everything, and everyone is a little bit different. And so the ability to kind of learn how you function, how you learn, is extremely helpful. And that's why I think in later years, while I'm hopeful that I haven't hit the stage where I have issues learning, I think I learn better because I know how to memorize a little bit better based on kind of that amalgamation of things or methods.
Yeah. So you're like
So
playing the wrong sheet, pretending you're reading. And
yeah,
I mean, your dad is a professional and your instructor is the one of the best. Then what happened?
so I guess that was the end of my career as a pianist. I essentially I was not super interested at the time in the piano, which again I wish I had spent more effort on, because I wish I had more foundation on the piano.
But why
But I
not? at that age? Why? What was the thing made you feel like, hey, I'm not that into this?
I think, not going into too much Freudian theory, I think it's fair to
Mm,
say that, when you see someone who is, um, professional, like a master of the piano, the bar is really high to be able to showcase what you can do. And so the
mm-hmm,
path is either you try to compete with that, which is very fair, or you try to find your own route, at least in the short term. And I think mine was in the short term that, and it coincided also with the kind of music that resonated more with me at the time, rock music, grunge, Nirvana was kind of up and coming and so forth. And so really
mm-hmm.
be able to kind of identify an instrument that I gravitated towards. And I vividly remember, actually, I was, maybe 12, probably that kind of age, going to a party with friends and seeing someone who actually ended up being a professional guitar player for a rock band,
Mm,
being, on the side. We're all teenagers, and he was, or preteen, and he was just playing an acoustic guitar. And it is one of those, overused example, but that's kind of my recollection of it, of hearing like the voice, like, oh, and then like just seeing the guitar. I couldn't, and I just saw the instrument and I was really drawn to it. And ever since, it really, in the last 30, like 25, 30 years, it hasn't stopped. It's literally an interest for the instrument, for the how it's made, for the different shape, the different models, like all of that. I've been really into musical instrument, the guitar more specifically. But that started at that particular time, and that's when I decided to buy my own, first acoustic guitar, to try to play a little bit, to educate myself, like all of those. I really started to gravitate from that party shortly after I stopped taking piano lessons.
play by ear again.
Oh, completely by ear. Yeah, completely by ear. Yeah, yeah. I remember, actually, there was an album which I listened to for years, called Unplugged by Nirvana.
Mm-hmm.
And that album, I just loved it, and I was really bummed when I realized that. So I started trying to play, and then I realized, actually, the band, the singer had died, so the band no longer existed. And I was really bummed, because I'm discovering amazing music, and I can't go see their shows because there is no more. But it started there, and then from one to the other, I started, you know, building a community or building or joining communities of friends who are into the guitar, who are into music, going to concert, learning more about the instrument, learning more about musician, and really using that as a way to, I think, build a little bit of my identity at the time. We all gravitate towards, either sports or arts or things to position your own identity when things are, very much moving, and you're a
Mm-hmm.
teen, and there's a lot of, comparison and things like that. And so music was a very useful anchor, and
Mm.
it's been an anchor that has changed drastically in nature, like the type of anchor that I go to for. But it's been quite it's been very very present up until now.
How did the guitar and music anchoring you in the real life?
I think there is an element of, similar to other form of arts or expression. I think
Mm-hmm.
you need to put the time. You need to be able to put the time. Either you repeat the same riffs, you learn something, but there is an element of, you go back to this learning bubble, and you keep at it. So you may progress, you may not progress, you may do the same thing, but it's a very safe kind of little cocoon. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that was an anchor that perhaps at the time I was looking for, or I appreciated. And in addition to that, I think it's also an ability to relate to other people, who also play music, who are into bands, and kind of building your little social circle, and
Community.
mine, community. And mine was definitely around music. I remember, whether people who listen to music, played music, there was quite a few of them, and many of which I've stayed in touch with up to this day. So
So when life encountered what kind of situation you will go back to music?
yeah, I think, I don't have only music in my life, but music is definitely an important part. But I can think in almost in terms of perfumes, certain smells, certain images, certain colors.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like I remember the smell of being in Canada for the first time, and it was my first experience in the
The
um,
smell
continental.
of being in Canada.
It was the summer in Ottawa, and I was visiting
Mm.
my cousins, who very kindly invited me there, and I stayed for about a month, and it was amazing holiday. But I don't know what it is. The what you get when you walk around. There is the the product that a city will use to treat the plants. There is
Uh-huh.
the smell of the bagel. We don't really have, at the time, we didn't have bagel in Paris. So all those smells are quite different. The perfume of the trees that you find in North America versus in Europe, all of those are very different. So to me, those are almost not protective.
Sensational cue.
Yes, exactly. Very, very well said. A sensational cue. And I think music is the same thing.
Mm.
You remember I don't know for you, I remember the first time I listened to specific songs. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
being sitting there, holding this book, or being outside, like very vivid memories. And I think this is part of almost the tapestry that you built uh, your your inner life with. And those are just like, you just add them to this fictitious wall as you go, and you keep building those memories. And I think those are very important. And when it comes to building safety, building a sense of net, building a sense of comfort as you move forward, it's important to have those, and it's valuable to have those, because those are useful point of reference.
Do you think you have like a wall or library of memory elements,
Yes.
and whenever
Yes.
you need it, you will just pull the lever and it will
Yeah.
help you?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Just the same way, um, uh, I think certain people, maybe more in the US, but there's a sense of like what's called comfort food. I think comfort
Mm.
is applied to food. The same idea of like, you have something that brings you some kind of comfort, because it's not about the peanut butter and jam, or those things, but it's something that reminds you of the sandwich maybe that you had when you were younger, or a Thanksgiving meal that
Oh,
you had when you were 10 years old, or a Christmas that you had when you were. All those are, I think, just echoing earlier part of your life. So that's why it feels
that
quite
makes
warm.
so much sense. Yeah, I really love the way you articulate it. Like, it's less about the taste right now
Yeah.
or the experience at the moment. It's more about how that experience triggered your brain, kind of bring back that experience you had before while you're tasting the same food or smell the same fragrance.
Yeah. Actually, no, I remember maybe a couple of weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, the interesting thing about your question about smell and those kind of memories, it's also so rapid. It's so quick. I feel that your brain functions so, like, the moment you experience it, the brain is kind of lagging behind. So you'll walk, you'll have the smell, like a perfume, for example, that reminds you of something in your childhood, someone who was wearing that perfume,
Mm-hmm.
and it's instant. And then your brain is trying to do the math and to understand, like, where was it, who was that, or all of that, and that person is already gone.
I
So I
see.
can't give you an exact example, but that happens, like, up until a few weeks ago. I remember this happening to me while I was working on the street in San Francisco. And it's interesting also, because I feel that in today's world, working in tech or in other type of industries, there is a little bit of a stretch. We try to keep aspiring to build the best future. So we kind of project ourselves. We don't live in the present, as far as like, I do this. We try to optimize call it our retirement, call it our
Mm-hmm.
next role, call it all of that. So there is a sense
Mm-hmm.
of like projecting in the future. But I think being able to retrieve things from the past is helps do some kind of balance, like a little bit of a mental protective element. I'm not
Wow.
phrasing it very well, but
No, I get it, but it's the first time for me to hear this. It's like we always talk about being present,
yeah,
but we rarely think about the fact that we are so drawn into the future
yes,
and trying to balance that back by pulling the past.
yeah,
And that's really interesting because for most of the psychologists, they're trying to avoid this because they would believe depression is because of the past, what has happened in the past. And anxiety is because of you're worried about may or may not happen in the future. So what they're trying to push everyone is stay at the moment.
Hmm.
Forget about tomorrow, forget about yesterday. But it's very interesting to hear your perspective like, hey, you know what? Sometimes we just can't control ourselves. There's so much
Yeah.
things to worry about. And I can stop but think about and worry about what may happen in the future. But maybe I will anchor back to my past,
Yeah.
those experience, those feelings, those tastes to pull me back a little bit so I'm centered and much more balanced.
Yeah, it's almost, I'll do an analogy that is worth whatever it's worth, but it's almost, this is the present here. And while we can try to focus on that moment,
Mm-hmm.
if you
Mm-hmm.
get pulled over there in the future, kind of getting back in the past, and that it's constantly like this, as opposed to thriving for something that's flat. And I think also you're talking about psychology. There is also the perspective of, we are trying to be in the present, but there is also the fact that our our unconscious and our conscious mind like are two very complementary and in conflict elements of ourselves. And so the idea of living by your playbook, which is very
Mm-hmm.
trendy these days, build this routine and you'll have a six pack and you'll be able to do and you'll I think there's an element where, yeah, routine is good and helpful to get to your goals, whatever they might be. But there's also this element where things are not as easy and, you can't just focus on the present. It's going to be bringing whatever is pulling you from the past, resolving conflict that you may have that you may be conscious of or not conscious of, and kind of doing that internal work. And I think that's where, from in a professional setting, when you look at a lot of peers and a lot of people like work colleagues, you see people doing more of that work and being grounded, and you see maybe people not doing as much or not being aware of the value of doing this and struggling a little bit more. So it's something that's very present, that element of thriving for balance, but experiencing that it's actually hard to achieve.
Agree. I think the methodology or the principle of being present has been oversimplified a
Yes.
little bit,
Yes.
right? Assume like, doing mindfulness meditation will just help you to stay
Yeah.
present. But the reality is much harder and complex than
Yeah.
this. So just like you said, you got your own anchor. I think that's great. I'm
Yeah.
still trying to search for that.
Oh, I
You
am
know,
so as well. Yeah.
like whenever I'm anxious or have a strong emotion, I may try play piano a little bit, play by ear.
Yeah.
And that's actually very
That works.
satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that totally works. Sometimes reading, if it's really deep thoughts or, confusion, reading helps
Yes.
a lot. Then if I'm grieving or really depressed, I might need to use my pen. Like I need to write something down. That helps me as well. What do you do?
I think a few of those are roughly. I think there's the term meditation. I still to this day I'm not very clear about what that means, because I think for different people it means different things. But to
Mm-hmm.
me, it's being able to get into a state where, like, very tangibly, I'm forgetting a little bit about time. And to me, that's a good sign. For example, to music, and
Mm.
maybe you'll relate to that as you practice as well and you play. It's sometimes you'll be sitting at the piano or playing something, and you don't know if 20 minutes have gone by or an hour and a half. And to
Yep.
me, that is, I imagine being something that shares some attributes with the people that talk about yoga, or the people that talk about other form of meditation, quote unquote. And I think that ability, that symptom of unplugging with the time passing
Mm-hmm.
by, says something good about the kind of the state you're in. You're able to remove worries. You're able to be more centered. You are able to connect maybe more with, in the case of music or art, with your hands, and the touch on the on an
On
instrument.
the string,
Yeah,
on the key.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise it's very easy to lose that element, that organic element. Because when you think about it, a lot of people now, they wake up, they work remotely, they get onto their plasticky keyboard and plasticky webcam to kind of get to work, and
Right.
then they it's a very
that time passed by pretty fast too.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
May or may not be that pleasant, but that time passed too. But I really resonate with what you just said about forget about time. Like capture the moment, so you realize time flies by so fast that you didn't even
Yeah.
realize it.
And you know when I think one knows instinctively when things is good versus not good, because you could say the same thing about social media. And you will also lose the concept of time. But there is an element that's so much more rewarding when you write, when you walk on the beach, when you practice an instrument, or when you spend time with your family. There's no phone involved. The loss of time, like not being able to track time, is one thing, but you relate to something that is feeding you versus something that is maybe more negative as an experience, where you kind of
Yeah.
you suffer like really depressive symptoms if you keep scrolling on the feed,
That's
day
so
in, day
true.
out.
That's so true because I call it aftertaste.
Yeah.
Like, yes, you
Yeah.
might not feel the time when you're scrolling TikTok or short form videos, but the afterwards just feel like as exhausted as maybe work at the same desk for 8 hours nonstop. It might be the
Yeah.
same level
Yeah.
of exhaustion. So you don't really get a true relaxation for your mind, for your body. Comparing to maybe, walk on the beach, or jogging, or, exercising, or
Yeah.
music. The aftertaste is different. Even though the piano frustrates me too, because I'm so bad and I have such a high expectation when they don't meet each
That
other.
is not true, Jane. I've listened to you. You're very good. That is not true.
No, I've never trained, and that's the frustration.
The training
Because
by
you
sure, but
have a vision and you kind of know what kind of music you want. But because I've never practiced and well learned, so I couldn't do anything about it. So 20 minutes is extreme satisfaction playing by ear. And after 20 minutes, it's like, damn, I wish I know how to do this.
totally. I hear you. I'm on the same phase as well for me as well. But the one thing that I'll say is you use the word vision, and you said I had a certain vision with the piano. And I think maybe that's a key distinction between social media and kind of the activities that we talked about, is the fact that when you approach anything like walking on the beach, spending time with loved ones, picking up an instrument or starting to write, there is an element of intent.
Exactly.
There's intent. When you're being served ads after ads, there's no intent. You just want to, not think about anything.
You're
But you're
passively.
passive. You're extremely passive. And not only are you
Yes.
passive, but you're being gamed as a set of neurons. You're being gamed by an algorithm. You're being gamed by an advertising strategy. You're being gamed by certain image that you'll react to a certain way, like all of that. And so I feel that is something maybe that transcribe back into what we're saying in terms of feeling a reward or feeling that element of numbness.
Yeah, 100%. I think what we were talking about is the choice of yours.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do, accomplish, and feel? I think it's important to reflect on the aftertaste.
Yeah.
That may help us to form the habit that we want to form, because sometimes those, fast food is very hard to say no to. It's easier, convenient, and satisfying at a moment. But only if we constantly reflect on how great we feel after doing something on our own choice, then that will potentially remind our brain, hey, this one might be the better choice versus, the other easier choices.
And there's also a sense of, as you're more critical, you build some self accountability. You also feel that you're able to achieve and make results or get some results, maybe not at the pace that you would like to, but you're able to kind of see that correlation, and it feels quite very rewarding, like taking some chances and being able to have that hopefully as unobstructive view on yourself as you might have. Like everybody is biased and subjective about themselves, but I feel this is an element where no, okay, well, I'll try to get a little bit better. If I listen to myself, maybe this is not what I would love to play, but this is actually sounded pretty good. Like this section, I actually nailed it. And how can I do a little bit more of it? Or how can I run a little bit faster? Or, there's those cues that you get back that kind of guide you to feeling that you're in charge of yourself. And I feel that's quite exhilarating. And speaking
Mm-hmm.
from the perspective, maybe switching gear from the perspective of a someone who kind of moved from his original country, there is an
Mm-hmm.
element of taking things into control and not having not being a victim or passive or inheriting everything around you, but being able to be proactive, take action, take control, understand that with control comes the fact that things may crash, things may go up, and fine tuning. There's something that is very exhilarating and that I've really enjoyed, in my journey of moving to the US and being in the US for now
How
about
does
10
that
years.
happen? Yeah, how does that journey happen? When did you move over from Paris to US, and what did you do?
Um, I think it happened very organically with very supportive parents.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's a big element of multicultural awareness in my family. The Egyptian side, the French side, my father who's traveled a lot, my mother who also likes to travel a lot. So there's an element of awareness, like it's best for if you're in a position to be able to do to travel, to experience different things. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think they quite anticipated that both myself and my sister would actually be, leaving and doing their studies and building lives outside of France. But it
Mm-hmm.
was quite organic. I went through the French educational system all the way up to what's called classe préparatoire, which is after the baccalaureate. You have a 2-year program, which is quite competitive to get to certain top schools. So I kind of did this program,
Is
but
that a high school or is that a middle school or?
so I will do my best to translate in Anglo-Saxon terms. I think you have
Yeah.
middle school, you have high school, then you take what's called the baccalaureate, which is a nationwide exam, which is similar
Mm-hmm.
to in the UK. You have the A level. In the US, I'm not sure exactly what you have,
Yeah,
and
in
then
China we have that sort of,
yeah,
college entry examinations. Yeah.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
that score will help you get into certain university. Now there is an upper tier of colleges and universities in France, which are
Mm-hmm.
only accessible if you do an extra 2 to 3 year program. And the idea with that one is they will t- they will they will recruit the top tier of people who did the baccalaureate. So you have to have good grades. And then
Mm.
from first year of that program to the second year, they cut off 50%. So 50% are
Oh,
out and have to go to, regular quote unquote universities, which are really good as well, but maybe not the top tier from a perception standpoint. And then
wow, that's
after this,
super competitive.
it's quite competitive. And then at the end of the second year, you
Yeah.
do another nationwide exam, which is really focused on each of those schools. So let's say, for example, to translate into US terms, you have a set of exams for the MIT, you have a set of exams for Stanford. So it's essentially during 3 or 4 weeks, you are taking exam that you've prepared for the last 2 years.
Oh
And
my gosh.
based
So
on the
two
score,
weeks,
yes,
you need to take multiple exams tailored for the selected colleges
yes,
you're aiming for. So each exam is designed by that college. It's not like
pretty
one fit
much.
for all.
No, some of them share, but for the really, like, if you want to go to for example, there's a school in France called Polytechnique, which
Mm-hmm.
is nicknamed X, and this is the top engineering school in the country. To be able to get in, you have to take some Polytechnique specific exams, and then assuming that you have the grades high enough, you are then in what's called oral examination, which is the second tier, and then you get admitted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went through this process, wasn't admitted into some schools.
So you went through the 2 year
I went
process.
I went to the
You
two
are
year
not
I went to the 2 year program. Yeah, totally. And
amazing.
the thing that was fun is between the first year and the second year, I
Yeah.
actually had there was a Christmas dinner with my family and extended family, and
Yeah.
I saw my one of my uncles there, whose daughter had gone from this system in France in engineering to Imperial College in the UK, and who's then at the time was at the MIT for master's program,
Oh my
and
gosh.
he
Lots of
was
pressure.
it was a lot of pressure, and he said, well, you know be open to other type of education that are just as good, if not even perhaps better. Um, and so, have you considered other school? So he didn't push me in a particular direction, but I thought, okay, well, I'll give it a shot to a couple of universities in the UK. And that is when actually I received my admission before taking those exams. I
Oh,
received my
from
admission
where?
from the London School of Economics. And so I was
Ah,
admitted a few months before. So I arguably took my exams a little bit lighter because I knew that I wouldn't be going to those schools, but I did them
you have the
nevertheless.
best backup.
Oh yeah, I had the best. And yeah, and from the get-go I thought I was tempted um to go to the UK for this program, also
Hmm.
because I saw this as a convenient way to test my drive to go to the US. Like if I'm going to be happy in an environment, in an Anglo-Saxon environment, I have
Right.
the opportunity to test it, like literally test it. And if I don't like it, I can come back after to France. And I actually really liked it. And then I applied for grad school. But going to London, going to the LSE was kind of the jumping board, the jump board for that next step, which eventually I really wanted, which was to experience the US.
So you spent 4 years in UK.
3 years. The degree is within 3 years.
I see.
So I did
How was that?
it was really good. It was interesting. It was a very different cadence. In France, contrary to popular belief, like in school, it's very intense. You study a ton, 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 and then I moved
Hmm.
to the system in the UK where, at least for the university, the pace was actually quite amazing. It was just maybe
Oh, it's
five.
slower than
It's
France.
quite. I cannot compare university in France, but going from this
Uh,
2-year program, which was literally every day working a ton, and to this environment where it was like 7 to 10 hours of teaching per week,
hmm.
uh, like really not much. Like I really had to find things to do in London
What
during
did
my
you
time
find?
there.
What did you do?
Oh, one thing that I started with is walking everywhere in London because it's such a beautiful city.
Mm.
It's huge. It's way bigger than Paris. And just getting
So
acquainted
walk the
with that
city.
city, walk a lot. Yeah.
I see.
So just a ton.
Which part of London you like the most when you walk the city?
The one I know the most was central London, which arguably for, peop English people is not the most fun or not the most attractive part of the city. But to me, that's kind of what I remember because when I was
Hmm.
going to school, I stayed in places that were nearby the university, and everything
Hmm.
was in central London. So next to Covent Garden, like really fun actually for a tourist like me. It was being close to Covent Garden, literally a few minutes. It was close to being to St. Paul Cathedral, to the Thames River. All of those places were really near.
Connected, yeah.
So
Yeah.
walking a lot around there, and it was a really fun experience.
Did you walk alone?
Oh, I mean, some, and also over the years, also made some friends and joined some communities. The French expats, and all those sort of things, and that made it a fun experience. And also, I had some family members living in London and a little bit outside as well. So that made it for a
Nice.
really, really fun experience. And again, being able to experience an Anglo-Saxon university, see what it looks like, and projecting perhaps myself to maybe doing something after in the US was also something that was quite exhilarating.
What's the biggest difference between growing up in France overall and your new independent college life in UK?
I think the one that comes to mind is having some self-awareness. And I think that has
Mm.
continued ever since. Is, when you are in an environment which is, not in a kind of a closed environment, but environment where there is a lot of attention paid to social codes, social cues. There's a clear definition of what great looks like from a socio-demographic standpoint. I think this can be a little bit suffocating, and also
Mhm.
you don't have outside perspective as much. And then when you get to London, which is a very multicultural city where you have people from everywhere, from different backgrounds, they want to do different things, that forces you to kind of step out and start building some empathy and understanding. Um, you see people that, you know, uh, none of their like family members have gone to university before. You see other people that come from generations of like super academic people. You have people that come from different countries. And all of that, I think, equip you with a sense of, first of all, I'm not the only, like my view is not the only one, and my view may not
Mm.
be always the best. And I'm actually empowered to kind of pick and choose and kind of make my own menu of how I'm thinking about this and how I'm approaching a particular topic or theme. So that feels very empowering.
In London for 3 years, and that becomes like the bridge. What made you think about, oh, I already moved from Paris, my hometown, to UK, and now I just want to go further to United States?
The I think the impetus was I got the chance to do a summer job in the Napa Valley, and it was something that, ever since I was 16, I did some summer jobs. Some of it, like at the beginning, I think when you're in France, you're given the opportunity to do like a 2-week internship, and so essentially that tells you, like, if you like something, here's the work environment, all of that. And so
Mm.
I kept doing those little jobs. So working in a restaurant, interning at a company. Again, not doing things that are necessarily. I learned a ton from a tactical, like from an actual like learning about the job, but the
Mm-hmm.
reality of working in a restaurant, which is super useful, the reality of not knowing what you are supposed to do, in an office, but you're helping here and there. And so I did that in Virginia in the US at some
When
point when
was that? How old were you?
I think I was 16. And there
16.
was an opportunity to work in Virginia. And that was
Yeah.
a fantastic experience. And
What
again,
did
like
you do there?
that was the for 2 consecutive summers. It was working in a restaurant, a French
Mm-hmm.
restaurant, as a matter of fact,
Of
and
course.
a company. And so that was really fun. It was also hard work. Literally, I remember the hours being quite grueling, but it was
Mm-hmm.
fantastic experience. I just loved every minute of it. Being able to, make a little bit of money, being able to be in an environment where like you have to prove yourself, you have to work, you have to ensure that everybody's happy and all of that. That was a fantastic experience, and also in a language that was not a language that I really mastered at the time. So really
Mm-hmm.
doing my best, but it was very satisfying. And I think a little bit later I did a similar thing in the Napa Valley for vineyard. And I discovered San Francisco. I was really attracted to the city. I thought this is the most amazing city. It was back in 2000, 2000 and I forget, 2004, something like that. And it was just, the city was amazing. And I thought, well, I would love one day to come back, like, working, studying, what have you, just get back, in the city.
You're from
And,
Paris. And
oh,
what
yes.
about the San Francisco that make you feel so attracted?
Oh, I mean, is it, how do you feel? Because I feel like when you grow up somewhere, you take it for
Mm-hmm.
granted. And
Yeah.
so that's one. And also, going back to the music side of things, San Francisco, like California in general, that was my entire imagination when it came to music studios and recording and famous guitar players. Like a lot of them are from Los Angeles or San Francisco. So there was like just a big element. And on top of that, it's a very attractive city in general. So that was kind of something that I really had in mind. And so when it came time to decide what's next after the LSE, I really started thinking in terms of, maybe that's an option. So I started applying for grad school, and one of them was UC Berkeley. And so
Mm.
I got it for a master's in engineering, and off I went.
Okay. You study management sciences and engineering for your professionals, while you're also a romantic and who are really into guitar and music. Have you ever thought about doing music for your professional, just as your dad, or this has never even crossed your mind?
I realized quickly that the bar to have a shot is not to like music, is to just live and breathe, to be extremely talented, and to have that being something that you cultivate from super young. Otherwise, it's a different kind of, it is not being a musician. It then becomes more being an entrepreneur with a little pinch of music. But like, if you really want to be a musician, kind of what I understood at the time, for better or for worse, is the fact that this is something that doesn't get improvised when you're in your, like, when you're 15 or 16 because you like music. And so and that was really my parents also were very supportive from that standpoint in making me realize that like you can continue as much or as little as you want the music, but if you're able to have a kind of well-grounded education, you kind of leave all the doors open. And that has been my approach, I think, ever since. And so cultivating music on the side, and being able to have something that, would lead me to have a career, whether in France, whether in the UK, whether in the US. I think that's kind of what I saw. And also having the opportunity, because that's a real opportunity, to also go to these interesting schools with interesting faculty. That was also something that was kind of really driving me quite a bit.
Yeah, there are a lot of, music schools in US.
Yeah.
But was that because you knew too much? Because,
Oh, I knew
for a
too
lot
much.
of us,
Yeah.
for a lot of us, not from musical family, had no idea what it takes to be a real musician. But you saw
Yeah.
it firsthand since you were born.
I don't know that I know a lot, but I think I at the time, is certainly now, but also at the time, I respected it quite a lot. And so I think when you respect something, you don't treat it lightly. It's a big commitment. It's not, oh, I feel like composing a song, like every 3 months. No, it's like, it's something you really have to
You have a high
dedicate your life.
bar.
Yeah, a
Right.
really high, I guess that's it. There was a really high bar. And I was not sure that I would be able to first meet the bar, to have all it took to have the natural talent to compete, because there's a big element of competition. And
But the thing
so,
here is,
yeah.
I'm not saying you're a bad engineer. You definitely not have the same level of bar for engineering versus to music.
I think the bar for engineering is a lot lower than for music if you were looking at those kind
See,
of
that's
career.
my
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, totally.
So, but an engineer who coded from 5-year-old
Mm-hmm.
might have the same bar for engineering as you do for music.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
is that because you care? You care music so much that you have zero willingness to lower the bar even a little bit, and you may disappoint your own music. So
Very
you
possibly.
choose
Yeah.
not to do it as a profession.
Very possibly. That's actually very interesting. I'm sure I'm sure that was part of it. I'm sure that was part of it. And also there was an element which I think I've retained, which is, in your work environment, I think it's easy to see the difference between people that, they do one thing and they are subject matter expert, and that is the main thing that they've done, the main role that they've held,
Yeah.
in 5, 6, 10 companies. And you have people that are more like jack of all trades. They wear, different
Generalist.
hats. And I saw myself in that perspective. And so maybe music and maybe engineering, like that fits into that perspective of, yes, there is room for people that are doing one thing 100%, but there's a lot of value in people that are able to wear different hats, have empathy for different, whether different instruments or different roles and functions in a company. I kind of see this in the same way. And there's rooms for those too. And you can build a successful company that's operating well if you have only like one type. I think you have. And so I think early on, without having the articulation of having had some experience in the workplace at the time, that is kind of where I saw myself, is kind of gravitate towards, well, I'll do a little bit of this and I'll do a little bit of this. And then if I'm lucky and if I'm as smart as possible in my steps, that will form into something that's a consistent and cohesive set of skills, set of things that will equip me for what I decide to do next.
You tried different things. You
Yes.
tried the music when you were little, then tried the management science, and then
Yeah.
engineering. Engineering is a very different topic versus what you had before. Like, how did you
Yeah.
make that pivot, and why?
It was an interesting pivot because actually the cohort of engineering that I joined, it was only engineers, and I was the only one that was non-engineer. My undergraduate degree is called management science. It's sometimes referred to as operations research. And it was from a school that was very much social science. So it was looking at operations research from a social science environment. And then I made the case when I applied to Berkeley that I joined the quantitative or kind of engineering side of the same discipline. And so there was actually, it was not completely inconsistent. It was actually just looking at the two sides of the coin when it came to operations research, like one that's more social science and the other that's more engineering. So it kind of worked out, but it was interesting because, again, speaking to that perspective of going into an environment where you have certain skills that not everyone in the room has, and you may not have all the skills that some people have in the room. It was the same environment where I didn't speak the engineering language per se, but I was bringing something else, and kind of finding my way into that mix was something that I can relate to this day. And I think a lot of people in the tech industry also have this kind of that background, as opposed to
Yeah.
maybe someone who's like, a hardcore like engineering only. That's all they've done and that's all they're interested in doing.
Yeah, I think you convinced UC Berkeley. And my question is more like, where does choice coming from?
Oh, I think there's an element of, um, to be frank, I think there's an element of getting your foot in the door and trying to find like what next step is feasible if you want to get into a particular place. There's an
Mm,
element, and of course, like I have a lot of empathy for people that are kind of working through immigration and all of like the permits and things, all that it takes to be able to get into a country and to work and to kind of establish yourself there. And I think
hmm
nowadays is very difficult. But I think like at the time also it was quite challenging. And so there is an opportunity to say, well, get your foot in the door into a program that seems like a good fit
Fit.
in an
hmm
environment, in a city that, is very, very attractive. That sounds like a great proposition. And then I'll figure out as I go afterwards.
Yeah. Do you think you're extremely independent since you were little? Do you think you always trying to be as independent as possible?
Uh, I don't, I think I know what I want, but I think being fully independent, like I've had the support of my family throughout. So
Because
yeah,
the reason I ask is I notice whenever you make a decision, for example, should I do music
yeah,
or not music? Should I do some different topics for my master degree, or should I wait the possibility and opportunity cost? You will make a very rational choice.
yes, yeah,
You will take different elements into consideration. You will think thoroughly,
yes,
weight, risk,
yeah.
opportunity, everything. So that's my observation. I thought being independent was the driver behind that. Um, Potentially that could be the reason for me, but it could be something else.
No, I think that's fair. I think there's a level of being independent, having control over my decisions,
Mm,
and being able to think. I think when I say think strategically, it may sound overly pretentious, but I think there's an element of trying to take into account the different perspective. Like usually when I make a decision, I try to hear different perspective. I try to integrate that. I have final say about whether I integrate this into my decision making or not. But I
mhm.
like to be able to think from different angles, because when you make a decision, it's rarely just black and white. It's rarely just financial. It's rarely just about how much you like something. There's a lot of elements. And so, yeah, I tend to think like that for most things in life.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's partially leads you to where you are today. And
Yes.
if you can make all those decisions all over again, would you use the same methodology?
I think so, with a caveat. We were talking a little bit earlier about being in the present. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of temptations nowadays to try to optimize too much and to really think, how can you optimize, your position in the future, your stability in the future, like all what have you. And I think one thing that I've learned is to try to temper that element of optimization with the kind of living in the moment. I've been in a
hmm
few situations where, you see people that try to optimize for a future that never comes, or for a future that is cut short because of illness, or simply you try to optimize for something you actually don't know that well. Kind of fast forward after I came to the US. I worked for about 6 years at Pandora Radio, which was a fantastic experience. A fantastic company. I just loved my time there. Learned so much. But an interesting example there is I started in the program management team, and eventually I built a program management team, which became product operations, and kind of run that team for a few years. And I, at some point, was looking at career growth, and I spotted the corporate strategy function as kind of the best of both worlds in terms of you have some element of strategy. It's a great role. It's very translatable in a lot of companies. So I built that as an aspiration item for me
Next
from a career
steps.
for next step. And because I didn't have the background to kind of jump from product operations to corporate strategy, I was very intentional in making my way to essentially work in close collaboration with the chief of staff at the time to help support the acquisition of Pandora by SiriusXM, which Pandora was acquired, as a way to kind of jump to corporate strategy. So it was almost like I can't make the A to B move, so I have to do A to C to B, and kind of building that. So it was a little bit of a long arch, and I was convinced corporate strategy is going to be set. It's going to be great. Well, when I landed there, it was great. The team was amazing, but I was a little bit underwhelmed by the function, by the role, by the ability to actually make some change. I thought it was very kind of building deck heavy. It was also post-acquisition in an environment where kind of everybody was holding onto their seats because there was some changes and some reorganization. And that was the first practical realization for me that, yes, you may try to optimize for the future, but there is some assumption that you're making. You're assuming that you will want to be living there or doing this or and would I have been a little bit more focused on the present? Maybe I would have. I don't regret at all that arch, but that was a good learning. And nowadays, I think I'm more intentional when it comes to trying to focus on kind of what the outcome is going to be in 5 to 10 years, and try to balance with like, what's the outcome right now? How is my level of enjoyment right now? How is my sense of balance or like mental state?
Have you thought about what was the real reason kind of inspire you to explore a very different direction versus program management, like something like corporate strategy? Like, what was the reason?
I think I think it goes back to the idea of pace. I think there was a perspective of like, I want to be able to catch up. I want to continue catching up. And so there was an element also that was maybe not fully centered in terms of that
Because you've been doing
placement
great
in time. Yeah.
right? You've been doing great, and in the program management for a couple of years.
Yes. Yeah. It was great. Yeah.
That was like really good trajectory, and then you proactively pivot your direction.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to understand is like, what inspired you? Is it because the current role the learning curve smoothed out a little bit? You don't feel you learn so much as before. You kind of master this function, and you get bored. I don't know.
I think it was a mix. It was the appetite for a little bit more, for a little bit of a change. I really enjoyed my role at the time, and really enjoyed the leadership as well. I think there was the appetite to do something a little bit different, to learn something different. And also, I think identifying some folks that were part of that corporate strategy environment that I aspire to get closer to learn from. And so that was a little bit of a mix that led me to kind of jump. And again, speaking from the perspective of a generalist, there's also that appetite that you're not wanting to have 1,000 hats on your head. That's too much. But being able to, okay, now you corner this. Now it'd be great to corner that aspect, and kind of building your own little perspective of what a well-rounded, white collar kind of job looks like and should be able to understand. And you assemble those different pieces of the puzzle.
You're, I think that you were in the stage of, exploring different possibilities of career at that moment. Are you always kind of person keep pushing yourself? Because what I see is you're doing this thing, you're doing really well, and you're not satisfied just being, pretty well. I want to challenge myself with something different. Do you always do this to yourself?
Um, I tend to have a lot of I tend to be someone who is curious. So I'll start
Mm,
with that. Um, I don't try to push too much, and I think that uh, like that appetite doesn't bring me to every and single, every single function that you can have in a company. But I think
mm,
I'm also someone who likes to be how do you call that? To decide the next step with some level of intuition that you then overlay by a fair amount of analysis. But I think at first
mm,
I kind of enjoy the little sprinkle of something that is different that kind of makes sense. And then I will put like a layer of, okay, does it make sense from this standpoint or from that standpoint? Is it consistent and all of that? So it's a little, again, a lot of my answer kind of are a little bit in between, in the sense that it's a mix of two things. And
mm,
the you were alluding before to the engineering versus art and music, to
mhm,
the perspective of corporate strategy or program management of France and the US. Like I kind of like that approach where you have different angles to a particular situation. So to
mm.
be able to launch a product having different perspective, like I think it's interesting. And at the end of the day, I think more and more, it's not that I'm trying to do too many different things, but I'm trying to build like a well-rounded perspective on something that I find interesting. So for
So
example,
you,
when it comes to music as well, I like
yeah.
the playing of an instrument. I like the making of guitars. I'm really enjoying the history of like old guitars from the 50s and the 60s. And I also like the
Mm-hmm.
production aspect. Like how do you, once you have different tracks, how do you make them into something that is kind of, work well together? So like studying.
Cohesive
Yeah,
harmony.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's I think that's the common language that I have through a lot of different examples in my life.
Cool. I can see that in your life as well. And then what happened? You moved on to the corporate strategy, which kind of hit your expectation, but also have some, realization of your previous assumption might be wrong. So then what happened?
Yes. Yes. And it was not that assumptions were wrong, but I think it's um it's taking ownership of like what everything means, and I'm like saying, well, maybe a little bit underwhelmed. After that,
Mm,
so I stayed for, I think, about like a year and a half in that role.
mm, mm,
Then I joined a startup environment, which was great, called Pledge 1%. It was a
mm,
fantastic experience, very nimble. We were about, I would say, 10 to 15 people.
mm,
And it was a company spearheaded from Salesforce. And the focus was at the intersection between philanthropy and tech. And
mm,
so the idea was actually very interesting from the get-go. It was Salesforce, back when it was a very small company, like way before its IPO, decided to
mm,
set aside 1% of their equity, 1% of their employee time, and 1% of their product licenses for philanthropy causes. So donating it to causes and things like that. And so the idea, once Salesforce demonstrated that, while when they scaled, so did that 1%, which became huge in terms of like corporate
mm.
giving.
Yeah.
The idea was to say, well, you don't have to be a huge company. You don't have to be post IPO. You don't even have to have profits to be able to set aside 1% of your employee time to go do some volunteering once a year or a few times a year. And if you put together big and small companies doing their little parts, the amount of impact in terms of dollar amount, in terms of hours of volunteering, will be huge if we're able to kind of gather that momentum. And so the idea was then to try to bring on board as many companies as possible, and
Mm,
bring awareness onto that, what's called the 1-1-1 model that Mark Benioff launched with Salesforce, and to bring it to a lot
mm,
of companies. So the startup worked closely with Salesforce as well as with Atlassian, and in a matter of quite a few years, we're able to go from zero to, I think, more than 20,000 companies that are
oh,
members,
wow.
about like quite multiple $billion of tracked philanthropy between all the different
Mm,
companies. And so being able to kind of create that blueprint. So it was very interesting. Did that.
What did you do
Um,
there?
I run strategy and operations. So
Ah, okay.
it was really,
So
really
kind of
interesting.
like mix your experience of
Yeah,
program management and the corporate strategy together.
exactly, exactly. And
It's
so
paid off.
yeah, it was interesting. It was um, having an element of course prioritization because it was a very small team, but
Mm,
working with super solid set of consultants and a team that was great.
mm-hmm,
And then the opportunity to have worked with a lot of SMBs because a lot of those businesses that were members of like 1%, a lot of them was also very small companies that created a good perspective that I had on SMBs, which was kind of my passport when I found the opportunities for joining Meta, for joining Facebook at the time as part of their
mm-hmm.
partnership solution management team. And
So
so
you
that's kind of
mentioned
when I made the
about
jump.
when you joined the corporate strategy function for the first time, it was a little bit underwhelmed.
Yes.
And was that the reason you kind of switched from a large corporation into a startup? Because that potentially going to give you more ownership.
I think there was an element of that. There was an element of ownership, of course. There was also an element of kind of getting involved into a startup. Pandora was about 3,000 to 4,000 people large. So being
Mm-hmm.
able to kind of get to something that's quite different and quite unique. And it's also part of the whole West Coast experience in my younger eyes is like, well, join a startup, see what it feels like. And this also provided some very tangible skills perspective that I think was very complementary to to working in a larger company. And so being
Mm-hmm.
able to do that was very interesting. And that intersection of again like corporate giving and tech made a lot of sense, really spoke to me. And so that was a big element in me joining that team.
Yeah, you worked for a large company like Meta and Pandora. You also worked for startups. What's the biggest difference in the sentiment and in the culture dynamic, the way of working, in your own experience?
It's interesting because uh, the experience of, for example, Facebook or Meta, also has some interesting insight. Like when you speak about the company to people, there's the assumption that there's an enormous amount of resources, of team that will support, of data available, of all of that. And I find that while it's natural to oppose like a startup environment to like huge companies, I think there's
Mm-hmm.
actually a lot of common points. At Meta, I don't want to speak for you in terms of your experience, but my experience was that in the time I was there was a lot of work that involved, you know, almost owning your product like you were a mini CEO. Like you secure your resources, you have to advocate for them, you have to be creative, you have to show the bottom line and the impact, you have to create a sense of gelling between your different stakeholders, you have to influence and all of that. I found a lot of those very common with also in a startup environment where you have to be nimble, you don't have all the resources, of course. So there is some obvious differences in terms of some of the framework, some of the processes in place. And I think ultimately that's where Meta I found sometimes has been just a little bit heavy on the processes by the nature of being such a big company, where when you're small, you can be a lot more nimble. But at the same time, I think there is a lot of overlaps in terms of the realities of a startup versus the reality of a larger company, even though it is a weird statement to say. I found quite a lot of overlap.
Okay, so you see the similarities between the two.
I see. I was more struck with the similarities than the differences, which
Hmm,
are obvious. Yeah.
I see. Which one do you enjoy more? Startup
Oh,
or large corp? General.
it's it's like vanilla and chocolate. I feel it depends on so many things. It depends on where you are in life. It depends on what you're looking for. It depends on your level of experience. It depends on the nature of the job, the seniority of the job. It depends on so many things. I
Yeah.
really have enjoyed both immensely.
But what do you mention about this? How senior you are, in which life stage, all matters. And where are you going? What are you trying to achieve? I do want to unpack that. In what
Yeah.
kind of scenario you think, hey, maybe startup will be a better choice in your opinion?
Generally speaking, I'll go back to what I think a lot of people align on, which is, in a startup environment, there's an element of resourcefulness. There's an element of trust that you have in the product. There's a level of building things from scratch, being able to be iterative very quickly. When you're a larger company, there's more blueprint processes in place. So I think from
Mm-hmm.
my standpoint, I guess to go from the common ground, a couple of things that are important to me is strongly believing in the product and having strong confidence in the team, and the team from a leadership standpoint and the team from a culture standpoint. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
those are the common C's that I look at for companies, whether work that I've worked with or that I've advised. I think those are very important to me. And then kind of the next layer is what phase, especially important when it comes to startup, is like, what are the different phases? What is the startup? At which phase is it? And is it
Mm-hmm.
something that I found, to be the right fit for what I have to offer and what they're looking for? And that's kind of where the connection is usually.
How to decide, like, which phase of the startup will be a good fit, comparing to our capability or resource?
Yeah, I think that okay, I guess I'll go back to my time at Pandora. So I was
Mm-hmm.
running a team that was program management, became product operations. And the operations side of things I've really enjoyed, maybe particularly like operations being the ability to be able to scale, the ability to create blueprint, the ability to create processes, not create processes for processes, but the ability to essentially operate smarter so that the the use of our collective brain can be spent on things that help scale
Mm-hmm.
versus redoing things, over and over. I really like that aspect. And so from that mindset or that preference that happens to be mine, I would
Mm-hmm.
probably gravitate towards a slightly later stage than super early stage of startup naturally. These being
Mm-hmm.
said, the exposure that I had from my experience at Meta and Facebook also provided me with a good sense of kind of 0 to 1. Working on different product that was literally, I was working on the actual launch from scratch. That provided me with an element of um, kind of setting the foundations even before you can start out operations. So now that I'm equipped with my experience from Meta and Facebook, I think like I would also entertain, kind of earlier stage startup. But I think those are important differences. And I see a lot of people either thriving or not thriving based on
Mm-hmm.
erroneous assumption on kind of what the reality is going to be. Because some roles are going to be very much tactical, like you're going to have to knock at every door, you're going to have to build, campaigns from scratch, versus things where the role is quite drastically different and really focus on how can we replicate better? How can we add another arm of revenue better? How can we mitigate risk? How can we scale a team? Or, those are very different.
I really like this perspective. I never thought in this way.
Oh,
Because
really?
what you were talking about is based on what are you good at, and what do you enjoy doing. For example, at a Pandora, you are more into systematically driving operation efficiency and effectiveness, and that requires certain level of scale, certain level of scope to
Absolutely.
realize. So early stage startup will be struggling. Like they're trying to get everything in the right place and that they're going through chaotic and constant change in daily basis. There's no way for you to build a system and, scale
Yeah.
immediately. It
Yeah.
might be
Yeah.
the near future. So later stage makes a lot of sense. And vice versa for, when you learn tons of 0 to 1 operation at Meta, then early stage startup becomes like a natural choice for you to contribute to. Um, I think this just strike me like it makes so much sense because a lot of people assess this question from, oh, the risk. Oh, will this startup, live up to next 90 days? What's the trajectory?
Yeah.
Where the funding coming from? Um, are they going to go IPO or not? To be acquired? So they're thinking about exit strategy or, the stability and the potential. But what you're assessing is really looking inside what I'm good
Yeah.
at, what I'm enjoy doing, and what are the capability and the resource I can bring to the table.
And I think, again, there is different things that you can lay on top of each other. That is the lens that I happen to focus on because that's the most interesting to me. Not that the exit strategy is not an element of interest when you join a startup, but I've been in situation and I've been in companies where you kind of run into those people that have been in a company way too long and are just, waiting, kind of, you see them not being motivated to kind of get to work. But they show up year after year, decades after decades, in the fading hope that the companies will go public or things like that. That is an element to take into account, but I don't think it should be the kind of the chief element in your decision. Great if there's a big upside, there's a potential upside, but again, that goes back to our conversation around projecting yourself in like 5 to 10 years. It is important to do that, but I don't think you should focus on that solely, because otherwise the present, all the exciting opportunity that you'll have to build something really interesting, to bring it to market, to expand kind of the base, is going to be lost on you, and that would be unfortunate.
Yeah, and when look at we look at startups, but when look at a company like Meta, do you see each team is kind of a mini startup within the humongous company package?
I'll start with saying that I think it differs a lot between, which team you're part of, which team you engage with. So I think the experience is drastically different. If you layer that on top of the fact that also, I think over the last 10 years, the tech industries in all its aspects has evolved quite a lot. The culture, the way it operates, the urgency around certain things, the focus on certain themes versus others. All of that has changed a lot. But my experience at Meta was, first of all, a great one. I was, from the get-go up until the last moment, I was really impressed by the caliber of people. And I think that to these days, the biggest asset when joining a company like that, it has nothing to do with the equity or with the, any of that. It's just you get to work with such talented people in the most part. And so I think when it comes to operating as a mini CEO, I think I remember, not word for word, but I remember some of the principles of Meta. And one of them I always thought was super strong, which is nothing at Meta is someone else's
Problem.
Problem. Exactly. And this is a thin line because you don't want to be kind of like picking up, left and right and lose sight of your scope. But I think it says a lot about the level of accountability that one has joining the company, whether you're, director and above, or whether you're a manager or an analyst or things like that. I think it says a lot. And so that level of ownership, that level of the ability to influence and create impact is something that you can do as much of or as little of, depending on what you really want to achieve. And so that's from that standpoint that I was saying that to me, there was an element of kind of wearing a CEO hat. It's like you own a product from a particular perspective, but you almost own it end to end, and then you have to make things happen. And that level of ownership, I kind of relate to my experience working in a startup, where similarly, you have to make things happen. There is limitation, there is restrictions, and you just have to navigate, make the best choices, prioritize the best you can, being able to make some projections and kind of, take it from there and then iterate. So that was my perspective, having been in quite a few teams during my stay at Facebook/Meta.
There was a topic we always talk about while at Meta, especially in the past maybe 3-4 years, as the company exploded. There's so many hiring and the team just become extremely large. The topic's about navigating organizational complexity. And it's not a topic only dedicated for Meta. It's probably a topic for all large-scale tech companies. Because the truth is that instead of hiring based on the need, usually the company hired based on affordability. So basically, they hire as many people as possible as they can afford. That comes down to there are a tremendous amount of extremely talented people gathered together, trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
One of the symptoms would be the team is so big, but there's no work to do. There's no real work to do. But because the people are so talented, people make work for themselves, right? And put it in a nice way, people constantly running research, as you said, have the full ownership, trying to drive the business, figure out new ideas, and then define the scope, define the project, become a resource for, get the cross-functional team together, build a pod, get it going.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality at the beginning was like, there was just no scope. There was no work. Yes, some of the people might be able to figure out their own scope. Some of them might not be able to. While some of them might be working on the same thing across two different teams. What do you think about this situation?
I definitely relate to organizational
Complexity
in the fact that in my time there was an amount of reshaping. And again, the leadership was brilliant in most of the decision, but there was an amount that the cadence of the restructuring was so intense that I think there was a lot of effort that were lost in kind of trying to bounce, for teams, trying to bounce back onto those new scopes, those refined scope, those nuances. Like that was quite costly in many ways to the teams, in my opinion, and to the productivity of the team. When it comes to feeling that the scope is at the beginning, there is not much to do, I relate a little bit less in my experience with that. I think that what made sometimes some of the functions, and looking around like at the different function that I saw as well, what made it sometimes challenging is that there were some tension between different orgs. There was, of course, politics like exists in any company, but that made sometimes those scope almost like counterintuitive, and so that didn't participate to the gelling between the different teams. So, for example, there were some initiatives, some product that clearly had an opportunity size and kind of really dictating that we would really benefit from focusing on them. Yet the operationalization or building an operating model to support this initiative was really counterintuitive and required a lot of influencing of different team members or different leaderships that just was not easy. Like there was a lot of things that made sense, should be done, but the nature of it led it to happen in like 9 months or 12 months or things like that. And so while the scope of like not having much, like I always felt that there was things to do, but the ability to unlock was sometimes really severely blocked by the weight of certain orgs or the processes that didn't always make the most sense. Or maybe they made sense like 2 reorgs ago, but now with the new structuring, kind of we were left behind trying to figure out. That was kind of my experience there. And processes that I think also, because of that added sense of ambiguity, a lot of teams I found found relief in building more processes so that their team would be, as safe as possible from impact and things like that. And those added processes led to further, escalation and
delay
issues and things. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I think there's like the common symptoms across all different large kind of companies. Will those kind of symptoms trigger you to reflect on the meaning of work?
Very good question. I think meaning of work is a few things colliding. I think I can speak of from experience. I think there comes like specific ages or age range where you tend to take a step back. There's also things that happen in your life, personal, professional, where like you'll take a step back. And this is an opportunity that some people will take and some people won't take full advantage of. It kind of depends. But being able to kind of take that step back and have a macro view to kind of zoom out is super helpful. And so whether it is, because there is a sense of added frustration because of more processes or what have you, the ability to zoom out is something that I found is very important. We're talking about going to a startup or going to like a large companies. If you take a step back and you kind of look at all the things that you want, almost in the way of a vision board, projecting yourself, a few years down the line, that gives you the lens that you lose when you're in the nitty gritty and the deeper things. Day after day or week over week in a particular environment. So that ability to take a step back, I found is a crucial one. And you're given that opportunity, I think, when you reach a little bit of maturity in a workplace in general.
Have you ever found an answer of meaning of life,
Oh,
at least for this stage?
I think it's continued being tweaked. I don't think it's like happiness.
It's evolving as
absolutely.
you
grow. We're sold on the idea that once you do this, you'll be happy. Once you do that, once you have this car, once you have this job, if you reach that salary, if you have this, I think that doesn't work like that, and it's something that's being tweaked over time. But I do think that there was a quote that I can't recall exactly word for word, but there is the importance of, in the perspective of growth comes the idea of like burning yourself a little bit. And I think it's very important in the sense that you have to go through different environment into like some element of tension, into some element of disillusion where, we're talking about corporate strategy, relative again. It was a fantastic function, but at the time I felt a little bit of disillusion. All of those really help you kind of getting a more crystallized view of what you're after in general. And then you can adjust based on the stage that you're at. But I think there's some learnings that you get through challenges. Like if everything was super smooth and, sometimes it's very tempting to say like, hey, I'm just going to do this and I'm just going to sign off every day at 6 and that's it. But through challenges, I think I'm a firm believer that you learn a lot and that makes you a much better person for it.
I can't agree more. I think the growth has nothing to do with age.
Yeah.
The growth is pretty much associated or correlated with the intensity of challenges in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, we only have one life. I'm not here to suffer.
Yeah.
Well, as Jensen mentioned, like the more suffer you got, especially early age, the better actually.
And unfortunately, resilience matters in success. I don't know how to teach it to you except for I hope suffering happens to you. And greatness is not intelligence, as you know. Greatness comes from character, and character isn't formed out of smart people. It's formed out of people who suffered. And so that's kind of the. And so if I could wish upon you, I don't know how to do it, but for all of you Stanford students, I wish upon you, ample doses of pain and suffering.
What's your thought of that balance, especially you're from France?
I think it's interesting, the pushback that you're saying about it's not related to age. I think you're right. And I think with age, you give yourself the I'm trying to find the right word. I'm blanking on the word. I'm just still looking for it. You're giving the freedom to be a little bit easier on you. So yes, growth is not related to age, but I think with age, you give yourself the grace, maybe that's the word I'm looking for, the grace to incorporate it without caring as much for certain signals that were very important when you were like a little bit younger. And so, it's a little bit of the stereotypical thing about like the older you get and the more you're like...
the less you care.
The less you care. And I think there is a comical extreme, but I think that element is important. And also like challenges lead you to realize that certain signals matter and certain others really don't. And that's where I make a distinction between evolving in an environment which arguably is quite competitive, and to some extent you're following your peers, you're following your mentors. There is a little bit of a herd aspect to it, like a positive herding system. But at the same time, your own learning should help you feel very confident and comfortable with the idea that sometimes it is the best move to actually leave that herd mindset and to really pursue what you really want. And so I think, it's no surprise that at certain pivotal moment in one's career, you see people taking some drastic um, changes
Turn.
and
Yeah.
drastic turn. And some of them are made in the moment of emotion and maybe might be regrettable afterwards. But if they're well crafted and they come from a good place where it's not a revenge, but it's like taking count of, everything you've learned, and you're making that turn because it is the most aligned with who you are. And yes, it may be a departure from what the herd is doing. I think that's the best move. That shows deep maturity and deep alignment with oneself. And so,
And to be honest, this sense of regrettable, you mentioned about, people made choice, they might regret about it. I think even that is the process, is part of the process. And it's not necessarily bad.
Oh,
you
it's
may
not.
judge the decision as a bad decision because you're regretting about it, but give it another 10 years. You never know.
Yeah. No, and I think if we were talking about the fact that there's an element of analytical framework for decision.
Calculated risk, analytical optimization for the decision making. Yeah.
I think those have, and I've been very fortunate, helped me realize that like I don't have a lot of regrets in general. And so I think back to what you're saying, like there might be departure, it might be, challenging adjustment, it might be, preparing your next move, kind of stealth mode, like what have you. But I feel if you kind of that approach, like hopefully the real regrets can be mitigated. And when you look back, whether in 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, you kind of realize, okay, all those steps were very well crafted. At least that's my hope.
Or inevitable.
Or inevitable. That's very good. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Any decision you made so far that you regret about?
That I regret?
You feel regret about, yeah.
No. Absolutely none. There's, and again, I wanna. We're all very subjective, and so it's not lost on me that the human mind is designed in such a way. I really think is designed in such a way that when something doesn't happen that you really wish happened, your mind has a way to self-soothe in making it to your point of inevitability, in saying, well, that was the best step. Like, you didn't get into your school that you really wanted to get into, but another one. And you look back, 10 years after, and you're like, well, that's how I met this person who was very important for me. And I was able to do this, and I was able to. And so that is the best has happened. So I am aware of that bias, and I think we all have it. But looking
it's not
back,
a bad one.
It's a good one, but it is a bias. But it may be a bias. It may be something that kind of maybe put some makeup on regret. But looking back, I really can't think of anything where I have regrets.
Anything you regret at the moment, but now look back, well, just like you said, thank God I made that decision. I met this person, and all this happened. Otherwise, none of this gonna happen. Anything?
No, because and again, like there's also another element, which is I tend to really focus on, and it's gonna sound, focus on the glass half full, because I think a lot of confidence, a lot of element like such as confidence, it's not just you have it, you don't have it. Is the more you the more you believe you have it, the more it is true. Like it actually. Believing in your own confidence will reinforce that confidence in very tangible form.
Way.
And it's the same thing with the glass half full. And I tend to be like that naturally. I think it served me well. I think it's an important quality when you're in a collaborative environment, where if you're gonna do something, don't find excuses. Don't just excitement is an important element. Like we don't talk about, we keep talking in a corporate environment about metrics and things that are kind of that fake cultural gel that is typical of kind of little involved management who just want to infuse a little bit of like the minimum required. But I think having enthusiasm is really like an important element. And so to your question, I tend to think of any challenges, any decision with a, it's for the better. So the looking back at regret, really, I don't have anything.
Yeah. As you mentioned, besides all those metrics and how much we can calculate and optimize for, I feel eventually you're going to have a feeling. You have a feeling if this decision is right or wrong. You have a feeling if this thing is going, on track or off the track, going south or not. Do you have that sense of feeling?
Yeah, I love that topic. I think that speaks to, we've talked about signals and we've talked about, what you hear from different people and peers and heard. There's another element which is just as important, which is, I think, looking internally, like doing an internal audit and keeping the pulse, because I think that a lot of one's behavior are dictated by something that one is not necessarily aware of. It may be like deep in your unconscious, and that leads you to overreact or underreact. It leads you to keep challenging, maybe keep keeping you motivated for next role, or keep you from seeking a new opportunity. Like either way, but I think there is a lot of conflict that reside deep into ourselves, and the ability to be to have some self-awareness and to kind of practicing it almost like you would practice the piano, where, whether it's therapy or psychoanalysis, like what have you, or other forms, of course. But that level of awareness is, I think, very important in it's a complement to the signals that we were just discussing. And they're very important because they will dictate how you enjoy a situation. Because again, you can get to your dream job or your dream house or dream everything. And I've seen a lot of people who are deeply unhappy and they've achieved exactly what they wanted. And so that to me shows like a misalignment or lack of alignment between lack of awareness that leads to those differences, and that can lead to be extremely unhappy, even though you're exactly where you were supposed to be and you wanted to be. And so I think that's an important element which I try to really keep top of mind, and I encourage people to do that as well.
But I think there's a challenge, especially for people like us. We are just well educated to understand how to optimize the decision making. And the level of awareness and education in that sense kind of interfered our alignment with those feelings we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because your rationalization is overruling your sense of feeling or instinct. You will tell yourself, yeah, it doesn't feel 100% right, but, because of A, B, C, D, E, and these metrics, I believe this is the best decision to go with. There are multiple times in my life, especially in Korea, I can totally sense this whole thing is going south. No matter it's a small thing or a large decision, the signal is clear. You feel the signal, or the God sent you the signal, you ignore it. You choose to ignore it because of the education you've gained, that you know how to make a right decision by looking at A, B, C. The problem is, at least on me, I do not have the courage to ignore the rationalization part. I do not have the courage just to let the signal and the feeling drive me through and, override those risk mitigation or opportunity optimization.
So to that, I think I completely relate to it. But I'll say that, in my opinion, that is a great opportunity to put in check the ability to be super rational, because we're not rational people. Like I feel there is,
human is not rational animal.
It's not rational. And so what that means is your you're conscious of certain things, of like a portion of your environment, your action, you react, but those way to react or overreact or underreact are fed by something that is unconscious, that are not rational. It's not a question of I should do this a little bit more, I should put a reminder. Like this, it doesn't work like that. And so I guess we're doing full circle with the aspect of meditation. I think meditation, whether it's, playing a guitar and losing track of time, or playing the piano, or all of those, the benefit that I see is less about the music, but it's about kind of getting in check with that unconscious and um, trying to organically remind ourselves that like we're not fully rational, and that this idea that we can all live like robots with a playbook to get everything done perfect doesn't work. It's actually quite a childish approach to life in general. And you kind of have to have that humility aspect where no matter how you know rational you are with spreadsheet for everything, that doesn't solve everything, and you have to have some humility in realizing that your mind is not just a function of rational thinking or fixing what's irrational. It's being aligned with the conflict that you carry, the conflict that you create from some kind of trauma, recent or old, and trying to have that alignment. And that's constant work, or that's constant exploration. Work means that it's negative, in my opinion. It's constant exploration and constant fine tuning. And the other
Mm-hmm.
thing that it makes it very exciting but also challenging is that, as opposed to a gym routine, you cannot copy paste to the person that's next to you. It's your own idiosyncrasies, your own gaps, your own. And to me, that's very exciting to explore. That's very exciting to learn more about it. And it's almost like the best analogy. Is almost like, when you're on a beach, imagine that you're putting or on a road, and you're putting your ear to the pavement to try to hear what's coming and to hear the sound of the earth. That's the best that you can do. Like
Mm.
you need to be able to listen to something that doesn't really have a shape, but that is there. Yeah, that's a terrible analogy, but that's the one that comes to mind, is being able to keep the pulse on something that you can't see, you can't hear, but that is dictating a lot of your behaviors, like organic behaviors. And yes, you can try to correct them with some rational decision making, and I'll do this a little bit more of this, and I do a little bit less of that. But ultimately, that's this alignment between those two worlds, and trying to ignore that unconscious aspect is blinding yourself.
Wow. I really like that. It's basically listening to your heart, but in such a beautiful articulation. But you are extremely rationalized person. We talked about all your decision making. It's well rounded into all kinds of possible optimizations and leave you with zero regret. Is it safe to say most of those major decisions is also aligning with your inner desire? Meaning, when you are optimizing for certain choices, you didn't need to or really went against your feeling.
I will turn the table a little bit on this if I understand well the question. I think
Mm.
it's more clarifying what's the inner desire. I don't think it was
So,
clear
for
from the get-go.
example, uh, you got an offer.
Mhm.
This is a terrible example, by the way. You got an offer. You find every number is right, the role is right, leadership is right, team is right, company is perfect. And you have a feeling based on all the conversation, just something is wrong, but you cannot articulate. The feeling is very strong, but rationalize the move is right.
Yeah.
And make you almost impossible to say no, even though that feeling exists. My question is, have you ever encountered this kind of situation before while you're making major decisions?
Yes, I would say, like, in a few different environments, let me put it a different way. I think while I'm rational, I would say, um, intuition has been something that has been cultivated within my family quite a bit, and not intuition in like esoteric sense, but just believing in that little voice and feeling that you owe yourself the fact that you should listen to it. Because yes, the numbers can be right, all of like everything can be right on paper, but you know yourself more and more. You've in a tech industry would say like we've done a lot of like testing. Well, with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you've done a lot of testing to in that environment. That's how you react. Like that self-awareness helps you build those learnings. And so intuition, I think, is the primary thing that make certain people always be lucky and certain people always be unlucky. Like we've all seen people that like they seem to strike after strike the best things, and some other people that
Mm-hmm.
seems to run from one disaster to another. And I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
oversimplify, but I think sometimes some people are attuned to listening to that intuition and some people are not. And so I think I value that immensely, and if anything, I've really been focusing on that. And so that's why sometimes that that continuity on paper may be something that like I articulate, but to me it was always following something that was an intuition. And I think it also equips you with being nimble when it comes to an intuition not being easy to follow. So for example, let's say like the move to London, it was literally
Mm-hmm.
done over like one evening, Christmas time between that first and second year. And it was not like a gigantic spreadsheet. It was like, yeah,
There was no plan.
yeah,
There
there
was
was
just like,
there
oh,
was no plan, but it was an intuition. Yeah, that makes complete sense. I didn't know what
mhm.
school. I didn't even know. At the time, I didn't know about the London School of Economics. I didn't know
Yeah.
the details of it. I hadn't searched the program, but I was like, yeah, actually, and in a matter of like 10 seconds, you're able to start doing the blueprint of what this could look like. Okay, well, LLC. Oh, that's actually being taught in English, and then maybe that would give me the credentials to be able to have some relevance if I was to apply to a graduate program in the US. Oh, and maybe I could go to or you can do that quick mapping in very quickly, and then comes the rational aspect. But intuition should always be kind of that first instinct. And it's the same thing, I think, when you meet people, like that interpersonal little light, you really should believe it. You should put some value on it, because that will also really help you. Usually is more accurate than not, in kind of
Mm-hmm.
what you validate after with your brain, with your data, with your spreadsheet. Like it comes after, but it usually validate that initial intuition.
100%. Reflect on myself. It's almost the same. I think actually the best decision I've made
Yeah.
is mostly, I mean, it's not zero calculated, but less calculated, but more intuition driven.
Yeah.
Including coming to United States. When I came, I have nothing, like no GMAT, not even TOEFL, no school admitted. It's pretty much just, okay, I'm just gonna quit my job in China, come here, figure out. And that's not as easy as we heard. Like, of course, there are moments I was crying in the shower because all the school asked me to write about, what do you want to do in the future? What's your goal? I had no goal, no plan, nothing. So those were the struggle. But the struggle was worth it. You need to overcome those struggle because you believed in your instinct that this potentially going to pan out, going to work out. So looking back, a lot of best decisions were instinct driven.
So I have I'm wondering about something, because you mentioned instinct and you mentioned the intuition being almost like completely opposed to rationality. And actually, I don't know that it fully is, because when you think about it, like put yourself in the position which you I believe you are already, but like if you were, as an executive in a room, a big element of like why you want senior executives making decision is not to like interpret a matrix where there's some numbers next to it, is that power of intuition and that power of instinct. And that kind of is actually the differentiating factor for a lot of leaders and great leaders, And so I don't know that I would oppose those two. I think intuition to me is the kind of laser fast, quick analysis that you do based on a lot of things, including a data approach and a rational approach, but not limited to it. It's your sense, but it's also your data. And you kind of make that quick mapping in 10 seconds. That is to me intuition. It's not solely just like, you're going
I
this way a
agree.
particular day and this way the other way.
You're so right. Instinct or intuition doesn't mean uneducated.
Yeah,
Doesn't
I
mean
think so.
complete irrational. It's not the opposite of rational. You're right. Because you mentioned about executive, decision inference. I did witness our CEO in my previous job in CPG made a decision of, a product package choice while we presented the data. And he made the completely opposite choice based on the intuition and experience and feeling. That was a moment when I was very junior in my career. I was like, oh, what's the point of my work? It means nothing to him.
Totally.
But as you grow, I kind of get it.
Yeah. And it's also a term that I have heard a lot. Actually, maybe those are some of the key terms that I've heard my father use in a musical context when he's talking about the greatest composer or the biggest artist, and there's an intuition. You don't try to use music you use music theory and as an afterthought to understand or to deconstruct something, but in the moment, whether it's someone who does an improvisation that is just like sharp genius, or a composer that does this is instinct, this is intuition. This is not him or her using theory to build that moment of genius. It is intuition that is explained after the fact using theory by people who may not have that power of intuition. And so I believe that whether in a business environment or in an artistic context, those are really this is the aspiring attribute to craft, to sharpen, because that is really the culmination, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And sometimes I trying to figure out what was stopping me, and partially maybe it's because of the fear of uncertainty. You mentioned about the sense of in control, and in control will help us to remove anxiety. And because you don't know what's going to happen post the decision, you don't know if it's right or wrong. So there's a certain level of uncertainty. And that leads to the fear that I'm too afraid to listen to my instinct.
The fear is an interesting concept, because I also think that sometimes you are facing with a possibility to do something, and you focus on the risk associated between option A and option B, but you mitigate the level of risk associated with the status quo. And so I feel like, when we're assessing risk, assessing decisions, it's important to be aware of your own biases.
We're going through some crazy time, I would say. It's a universal question. So I don't think we're going to solve it here, but I do want to put it here for discussion. Sure. As AI comes saying, job category has been redefined, I would say. I think I read something called Society Unknown Index has been surged to highest in history, meaning the uncertainty is extremely high to the society. Yes. And I agree with you. Under this context, the mental health become pretty much the most natural topic for no matter professionals or every normal person who are experiencing this. You're in the moment of change for yourself. Reflect on that. How did you feel? What's the current state?
Call it with age, with experience, with everything. there is an
Mm-hmm.
element which I'm enjoying of feeling more attuned between kind of what I want to do, what I'm doing, maybe compared to before. I think that when it comes to challenges, there is of course the understanding that things will go up and down, and one way you're gonna be feeling like on top of the wave, and sometimes you'll be feeling at the bottom. And no matter how much you paddle, which is like the best analogy I can think of, the best you paddle, at some point when you're at the bottom, you can go to the top. And no matter how you paddle, paddle when you're at the top, it's not going to make you drop at the bottom. So there is a level of letting go that I think
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced very tangibly in the last maybe like 10, 15 years. But the difference is I think I've been able to reflect on it more so that I can carry some of that approach, because it's always easy to feel like when you're on top of that wave to feel like, oh, things can go to hell. And well, okay, but you're on top of the wave, it's fine. And then you kind of forget. So there's almost like a cycle. And so being
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more conscious and self-aware about those cycles so that you can go through them, but you're not being locked by them. And I think, to me, that is at the core of being able to manage anxiety and stress, because anxiety and stress is essentially you zooming in into a particular example and being into those cycles and feeling like you can get out or things like that. And so trying to kind of have a tendency to try to focusing on being able to zoom out and spotting yourself on the cycle and building the tools over time, the tools that work for you, are things that I think can help equip, because no matter what, again, change is going to happen, and like hard years, hard moments, things that you can't avoid, but being able to have that mindset. And in addition to that, there is also another one, which is it's okay to fall, it's okay to fail, it's okay to, like, the main thing is not to fall, and to focus on that is the ability to kind of get back up. And it's a very cheesy and overused example, but I cannot prove it wrong. It's like people focus on like, oh, this is falling down, but no, the main thing you should focus on is like, no matter what, just try to get back up. And that means what we talked about before. It's like self-awareness is taking some checks, like temporarily, like throughout, is the ability to build a network of like support, is being able to be self-critical and admit when you're not accountable to yourself and say, well, I'll do better next time. It's being able to document yourself and do the research and spend the time on this. If you're going to spend time trying to optimize your 401k or your investment, well, at the very least, you should spend as much time focusing on kind of what's inside your head, because it's way more, uh, way more valuable. We talked a little bit earlier about being kind to yourself, and this is an expression that when I first heard it, it was a little bit too. It didn't really speak to me that much. Being kind to yourself is kind of being weak to yourself, or being. But I think there is an element of, just because you can power through a situation is not necessarily the best for you long term, for your durability. Just because you can destroy a wall by running towards it, yeah, in the moment it might be the best decision to do. It may be the only decision to power through something, but being kind to yourself enables you to run a marathon versus running a sprint. And that's something where I didn't have that level of understanding before, and a few specific things enabled me to really kind of develop some awareness around that. And I've changed quite a bit my perspective on it since.
How did you do differently now, being kind to yourself? I do remember power through is a word we use on daily when we
Yeah,
were at Meta.
yeah,
That's how the work's supposed to be. But I 100% agree. I think, if it's a marathon, you need to think in long term. But in nowadays, almost every professional is trying to push through. But to your point, if look back 20, 30 years, you might realize what you truly sacrifice.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a deep topic that touches on a lot of things, but the one that comes to mind is also going back to the intuition and going back to your own intuition. I think that when you're in an environment, and especially environment that are competitive, it's very easy to surrender your level of intuition with the fact that you have deep trust or deep respect or legacy respect to whether it's leadership, to a level of experience, to titles, to a particular pedigree that you hold as almost sacred. And then I feel that being able to retain that level of intuition and to, in the moment, realize, well, that person or that team or that entity, yes, on paper should be amazing, but they're actually falling short, and recognizing that, I think I've seen multiple times in my career, is an important element. Like it's almost tangential to the imposter syndrome. I
Imposter
think
syndrome?
imposter syndrome is like, you kind of remove that, maybe that intuition, and you are put in a position of self-doubt temporarily because of a particular environment. And I feel that moving forward, it's important to, of course, be humble in a challenge and be humble about what you have to accomplish. But if you're able in the moment to maintain some perspective, that ability to zoom out and to kind of extract yourself from a situation, maybe you're going to be able to best manage, uncertainty, to best manage an opinion that you realize is maybe not fully grounded, that will give you the space. Like you're still going to have to power through, but I think you'll maintain a sanity that otherwise you'll compromise, and it may take you a long time to kind of recover from that, if it makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like you may still need to power through,
Yes,
but
you may.
in
Yeah.
a different kind of mindset. That's important. If you corner yourself to the point that this is the only way to go, the only way to survive, and you have to power through, that's very different state versus I want to power through at the moment while I do know that I have option if I fail.
Yeah, it's the difference between doing something out of fear or out of fear of failing and doing something with intention. It's almost the same thing as saying, like, you go to the same office, but you have, $1 in your bank account, or you have a fortune. The role is going to be the same, but your mindset is going to be quite different. Your intention is going to be very different.
And pull back to the reality a little bit. While the reality is always colder, people still need to survive. Like, pivot career may mean lose your insurance, may mean, can't afford the mortgage, may mean, significant drop of your income.
There's two things. There's intention and there's everything has a cost. Those are the two things that comes to mind. In life, I think there is of course like trade-off that needs to happen. And I think that is where you need to be very intentional about those trade-off and feel comfortable about them. If your focus is on, setting up the next competitor to ChatGPT from the ground up, it's quite different from building a family. It's quite different from building a side gig as an amateur musician touring around on the weekend. And I think you have to
level set expectation.
To level set expectation. First of all, you have to set what you want, and you have to come from a place where you know yourself enough that you're being realistic, and at the same time you have some ambition and some goals, and you try to establish a path. And then you have to be accountable to yourself that you are making a decision. You're being intentional about what you want to pursue. You're being intentional about maybe what's less important. And then being able to identify what are the right steps. But I think the challenge may arise when you there's a gap. Like you want to do this, but you're also attracted to that because you're following the herd. And then you're getting stretched in a way that feels very, very, very bad for pursuing either of those goals. So in other words, like I feel if you're aligned on what you want versus what you don't want, and you're aligned on kind of that strong narrative, you're not going to be you're less likely to be pulled into 1,000 different directions, in my opinion.
And what if what you want cannot make you a living?
That's a good question. I think that's where that layer of exploration is important, at least in my experience.
Mm.
You know, pursuing a career is not just pursuing a career. It's establishing a network, is talking to that network, talking to those acquaintances of acquaintances, being able to establish new relations, try to grasp what may be tempting as a kind of a glamour goal versus the reality of it. If we're talking about becoming a painter, you may have the perspective of Rembrandt and the Ténébreux painter, and there's a reality of it then, and there's a reality of it now. Just understanding what you're shooting for is maybe kind of step one, because some people may be interested in something because of certain reasons, but may not be aware of these other elements or attributes associated with that particular thing. And so being able
So
to...
should they be like you, choosing, something much more rationalized versus the music, even though you have the full heart for guitar?
I like to think that, and it's not I like to think, is a lot of people that I know are musician, is they
Yeah.
went to music because there was no plan B. And maybe that's what made them amazing and
Extraordinary
successful.
musician,
Yeah, because there's
There
no
was
plan
no
B.
plan B,
And
but
you know
no
as much
plan
as...
B, is that the right thing to do?
Well, you know that in business, try to approach any decision at Meta with saying, hey, this is plan A, we don't have a plan B, there's no mitigation plan. That's a very different approach. Like, I think it's, I don't think I think we try to oppose sometimes different mindset, and I don't think I just think they're different, but they shouldn't be necessarily opposed. I think there are people that are motivated by saying like, hey, this is plan A, there is no plan B, I'm going to force it, it's going to work. And there's another approach, which is, hey, we're going to diversify, we're going to be a little bit more risk averse, we're going to have a scenario for every opportunity. And I think it comes down to your own perspective. Like, I don't think there's a better or worse. I think that
Depends on affordability. Can you afford all in? Or maybe you cannot afford all in, then you have to diversify your options.
It's challenging to respond to this one because I think naturally I'm more in the camp of having a strong intuition, but planning different scenarios. And so when I think, for example, about music, I'm not saying no to music at all. Like, as I'm close the door, I have closed the door to one. I've closed the door to one avenue, but there's a few other ones that I want to keep open, because as I'm doing things and I'm multiplying different experiences, it may result to something that is tied to music down the line.
Is your father all in music?
Oh yeah, he's all in. Yeah, and I
so
think
you saw that, you witnessed,
and that's what has made him really successful. Probably is that ability to be fully in. But I know that my mindset feels more comfortable, and maybe there is a strong emphasis on the word comfort. Feel more comfortable, kind of building that different mindset in terms of like having different options and trying to investigate like different things. And maybe that's the difference between, or maybe that's the difference between a generalist and, going back to what we were saying, a generalist who has the hand in like different buckets or different hats versus someone who has like one hat and wears it with great grace and great success, but a single hat.
What did you see your dad pay for the whole career, all in music, all his life? What did he do?
Immense. Like, I think in the Silicon Valley, there is a perspective of looking at certain figures and really kind of focusing exclusively on that industry and seeing those are the most, hardworking, blah, 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 blah. I have still to see someone who works just as hard as someone who's in, the industry of music, because again, it's so competitive. It's so unique. There is no copy and paste. And so I think what I've seen is immense continued, sustained dedication.
What's behind that dedication?
I think it's a passion for music. I think it's also uh, talent, talent that 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 graced him when he was very young and that he cultivated.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not, like, how to say, like, doubling down is an expression. It's not doubling, tripling. It's you have talent and you add work and you add a sense of um, an kind of strong interpersonal skills, and you
Mm.
put all of those and you add years and decades of work, focused work, and that's what you get.
Have you ever noticed any moment in his career he was like, okay, I'm so tired of this, can't do this anymore?
I think yes, but at the core there is also yes, when you transform a passion into a full-time job and a profession, there's an
Mm.
element of like the reality kicks in, and maybe sometimes there's some element that are less shiny. But at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, like comparing someone who works in a corporate environment with someone who is embodying music and doing interpretation of composers that have lasted not just, the test of time of 20 years, but of 200, 300, 400 years, you're talking about a mission that I find really noble and motivating. But of course, like there's some moments I'm sure where, it's tough and you have to be on the road and traveling, and, flying is not as fun as it was probably like 30 years ago and all of that. You spend more time to go from A to B. And also the music industry has gone through many different iterations over the last, few decades. But his passion for music, from what I've seen, has remained really untouched, which is amazing considering his career length.
Yeah, I always see people with identify their own passion as really lucky person.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
because you mentioned about all the draining moments, but that doesn't shake the decision and the choice of
Yeah.
doing this.
But I think there's also the work involved with continuing to ignite that passion and keep it reignited. This is also that. I mean, through work,
What is the thing ignite that passion?
it's I don't know if this is the right term. I don't know if you would agree with that, but the idea of like self-exploration, because when you focus on interpretation,
Mm.
which she does, it's ingesting deep inside a piece of music, notes, and there's an aspect of ingestion and then like reoffering it out, which is a lot about like, the tools that you have. It's not just about the mechanics of it and the hands and the virtuosity, but it is also the
Mm-hmm.
sense of meaning. So I think a lot of work he's done has been that self introspection when it comes to music, because I think that's a big element of that kind of, profession.
Yeah, yeah. I went to a concert that was performed by Mayoyo,
Yes.
and he mentioned about music is energy, and
Yes.
I just can't agree more. And that's the strongest sense of meaning of why I can sense like he's devoting his whole life into this. I think for most of the musicians, definitely have that very strong feeling and knowing exactly why they're doing what they're doing. What kind of impact do you think your father has on you?
Oh, profound, profound. I mean, it goes way, way, way beyond music. I think uh, there's of course the seeing someone who's been dedicated to his work, to his passion, to his art for that long.
Mm-hmm.
There is the fact that he's been able to also maintain uh, being a great person, a great dad, not just a musician. A lot of musicians are, I would assume, quite insufferable outside of the stage and outside of their passion, because it's a very all-consuming profession. As said, it's not something that you turn off to go skiing in February and over the summer. It's like all day, all day, every day,
All year round.
all year long. But at the same time, very no. I mean, I couldn't think of a better father figure, and by extension, same thing with my mom. Like I really have been extremely lucky from a parent standpoint, and they've both been extremely inspirational. I've grabbed a lot of things and I've kind of applied to my professional life, but just generally speaking, being able to live by your word and to value the power of intuition, like all of those are things that they've really reinforced strongly as I was growing up. And I think those are very instrumental in giving you some ground versus in giving you like gaps below your feet where you're gonna stumble, your entire life.
You feel grounded.
Yes. Or as grounded as I can. Let's keep it inspirational. Yeah.